Ok, olá todo mundo, Edmar do Galli aqui, eu sou diretor-geral da IgnitionOne para a América Latina. Eu vou começar, o webinar vai ser com o Brian, em inglês, mas eu vou fazer uma introdução antes para localizar as coisas e para você o hoster, né? Pois bem, sou o diretor-geral para a América Latina, começamos IgnitionOne há 2 anos e meio no Brasil. E a IgnitionOne é uma plataforma, para quem não conhece, é uma plataforma de marketing digital horizontal. Isso quer dizer, não é apenas um point solution, como display ou como search. Na verdade, nós temos todas essas possibilidades integradas numa plataforma. Display, search, automação, atribuição e agora o DMP no centro dessa plataforma. O DMP da gente veio da aquisição da Knotice no começo desse ano. E a Knotice é uma das empresas, um dos DMPs listados pela Forrester como um dos melhores do mundo. E o Brian Degan, que vai apresentar, é o fundador da Knotice. E, na verdade, o Brian é um empreendedor. Enfim, nos últimos 10 anos, ele empreendeu pelo menos 3 empresas bem-sucedidas, entre elas a Knotice, que é um DMP bastante parrudo, enfim. E nesses últimos 6 meses a gente integrou esse DMP na plataforma e agora está available no Brasil, disponível no Brasil como um produto da IgnitionOne integrado no resto da plataforma toda. Então, sem mais introdução, vou passar a palavra ao Brian. Brian, I made a quick introduction about you, about your entrepreneurship, well-succeeded entrepreneurship with other companies, but mostly with a Knotice that IgnitionOne acquired 8 months ago. And that's it. Oh, I forgot to mention the questions. Se vocês tiverem perguntas, o Brian até prefere ir respondendo durante Como o assunto é bastante técnico, bastante profundo em relação ao DMP, talvez seja mais fácil ir respondendo as perguntas durante mesmo o webinar. Então vai mandando que eu vou interrompendo o Brian, a gente vai responder, ele vai respondendo as perguntas, tá? So, Brian, please, with you.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction here. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm going to be stepping through a series of slides on the front end, provide a bit of an industry perspective around the data management platform topic, step through a client example of how a DMP can be used to drive revenue, and then demonstrate the platform capabilities within the IgnitionOne Digital Marketing Suite as it relates to DMP, as well as other things that it's supporting, which we will get into here real soon. So some of you on the call may have seen this report that was published by Deloitte. It was a global survey of chief marketing officers, which in some respects is a proxy for marketing organizations. And it had asked, what are the top priorities in 2014? And not surprisingly, the focus was around driving revenue and doing that by acquiring customers, end-to-end customer engagement, and the top internal priority pertained to data acquisition and data management. And it makes sense because you need data to really be able to do those other 3 things well. So with IgnitionOne, what we do really focuses on those outcomes for our customers and leveraging our platform to do that. So it's really about acquiring customers, being able to convert customers more effectively, and being able to grow customer value throughout the customer lifecycle. And so to do that, data is at the center. And so with our data management platform, that really becomes the core to be able to drive analytics that result in insights that allow you and our customers to orchestrate cross-channel experiences that then in turn drive revenue in those different ways. So that's it for the overview. Now let's just really jump into the DMP topic, but I did want to provide some context for how we're thinking about the data management function within an organization. So DMP is a simple term, but it means different things to different people. And when you're exploring the topic of data management, the deployment types and how people think about it can be different. So if you're thinking about different DMP buyers within a marketing organization, and so I have the titles down below, you can see on the left-hand side we have a VP or a director of paid media, so somebody that's responsible more for advertising. And then in the middle there we have a VP or director of digital marketing. So this could include paid media, but also direct digital channels like website, email, potentially social. And then we also have the VP or director of analytics. And then on the right-hand side, we have the SVP of marketing or the CMO. So these titles are important because they're all engaging with DMPs, and they're thinking about how they could use those DMPs for different things. So on the left-hand side, if somebody's coming at this from paid media, it often focuses around audience management, audience being display audiences to be able to enhance display advertising targeting. When you get into the middle, the focus really tends to be around data aggregation, developing a 360-degree view of the profile, and being able to leverage that profile, that data, in a multi-channel way. So whether it's on the website, whether it's via email, whether it's in display, whether it's on Facebook, being able to create an experience and activate an audience that is consistent across those channels. Now, we can also take this data into offline channels. So it can support direct mail, it can support outbound telemarketing, and truly be multi-channel, both in a digital context as well as an offline context. And when you do that, the DMP really starts to enter the realm of traditional marketing databases that have powered campaign management as well as analytics and advanced segmentation. So that's the continuum. If you look at the first generation of DMP deployments, although all of them would kind of speak to that broader promise of multi-channel data activation and 360-degree profiling of consumers, they often really resulted in another data silo that was focused around enhancing display targeting. With IgnitionOne, and when I say IgnitionOne, I'm talking about the IgnitionOne historical business that had focused a lot on scoring and profiling of users to be used within paid channels such as display, search, and social. And then when you combine that with the historical Knotice deployments, which really were focused more on the middle there. So the profiling, the multi-channel activation, some customers actually use this as the marketing database. When you combine those two platforms together, you can see that we really cover a broad footprint of that continuum. And that's important because ultimately, getting back to that top internal priority of data, being able to have an operational data set that can really support and span the customer life cycle and all of the different use cases that are there from a campaign perspective as well as from an analytics perspective is important. Now, the reason why data is the top internal priority and data management platforms have become so popular, it's because traditional marketing and customer databases and CRM systems have generally just not been that great at being able to ingest the massive amounts of behavioral information that comes in online across multiple devices. We have anonymous profiles, so you don't necessarily know who the person is. They're just showing up at the site. And they historically haven't been great at being able to activate that data across a variety of different digital channels. So these pain points have really given rise to the DMP category, and they've also created a lot of data silos and fragmentation within internal marketing organizations, which is what we're solving for. So another question that often comes up is, where does the DMP fit within a marketing organization? So this assumes that the DMP was purchased by the advertiser or by the brand. And within that marketing organization, you have a traditional marketing database, you have an analytics and BI ecosystem, business intelligence ecosystem, that would be especially within larger organizations. You have all of the different platforms that are available for channel execution or channel management, so email, website personalization, display, and then you can also have campaign management systems. So the DMP really becomes a hub that allows you to leverage all of those different systems and platforms in place and get them to work together better to be able to drive results across that customer life cycle. So these are some examples here. If we step into a client, here you can see that we're just looking at a very simple revenue health report, budget versus actual. So if we have all of this information across all of these different digital channels, and we have the performance as well as the cost, we can start to understand how we're performing. So whether it's display, whether it's search, whether it's affiliates, being able to understand very easily where the client stands from a revenue perspective, budget versus actual, is really powerful. This starts to step through how we're able to take an insight and really develop a strategy off of it that can be facilitated by the DMP. So the insight was, what they found, or our analytics team found, was that if a customer purchased twice within the first 86 days of them becoming a customer, we found that the lifetime value of that customer grew very significantly. So it became really important to develop a strategy that would really drive towards that second product purchase within the first 86 days. So what you're looking at here is the incremental revenue opportunity that we believe we're going to be driving over the next 12 months based upon utilizing what we refer to as a next best product model, and I'll talk to that in a minute. You can see here the assumptions for these different audience segments that we're going to be driving the incremental revenue from, and the origin of how we're going to be doing it is this next best product model. So what is this? So what we looked at was, within the first 86 days, somebody who purchased from one category oftentimes purchased from another category, but then we also intersect that with all of the behavioral information of individuals as well. And so this is a really good example of being able to use a profile that has traditional transactional information, online and offline, marrying that with behavioral information to really understand the propensity for that next purchase. And so when you use that data, develop the model, and then you're able to activate it across these different channels, it makes implementing a strategy like this to be able to drive that purchase within the first 86 days easy to do. So this really lines up with the priorities that we were talking about at the front end in terms of driving revenue, through acquiring customers, through better customer engagement, and really having that being driven by the data itself. So when I jump into the demonstration here to highlight some of the DMP capabilities that I'll be stepping through, what you'll see is the navigational control for our digital marketing suite. So real quick, our digital marketing suite consists of two categories of capabilities. Hub capabilities here span channels. So when you think about the DMP, it spans different channels. Our analytics spans channels when you think about attribution and media mix modeling. Our dashboard, which you'll see is personalized for every user that logs into the system, spans channels. And then down below, we have the individual channels themselves. So we have search, display, website personalization, email, and social. And so one of the things that's really great about IgnitionOne is that we have a lot of flexibility in terms of how our platform can be deployed. Oftentimes, customers start with the DMP and use that and plug that into other platforms that they have in place, but there are efficiencies, there's data fidelity benefits, and just the ability to do more with less when you consolidate more capabilities onto a single platform. So this recent research from Deagan talked about our footprint as it relates to other marketing tech platforms that are out there. And of all of them that are out there, what they found was that IgnitionOne and also Adobe are the top two that really align with the trends that they deem most critical for marketers to be focusing on. And one of the key trends there was the fact that paid media, advertising, and marketing technology are coming together. And that convergence needs to be dealt with at a data level and at an application level. And IgnitionOne is doing that extremely well. So with that, I'm going to jump over into the platform demonstration. What you see here, and getting back to a comment that I made at the very front end, being able to have a single operational data set that's not only supporting the DMP, but also supporting things like personalized dashboards is really important because it makes everything more actionable. If a user logs in here, whether they're the email practitioner, the display practitioner, the search practitioner, or the CMO, they're able to receive views of the key metrics that they want to be able to track personalized for them. And what's great is that all of these different views, again, are running off of the same data set that our DMP is running off of, that our social platform is running off of. It's not separate. So I'm going to click into analytics, and I'll come back to this towards the tail end of the demonstration. But I want to talk a little bit about how we ingest data into the system for the DMP and what you're looking at here in terms of real-time views. So to deploy the DMP, tags get deployed on site. We mirror some of the data schemas for the known CRM information that we need to ingest into the system. And once we turn those two things on, we start creating and enriching profiles of your prospects and customers. Now, what you're looking at here is actually for one of our customers, Travel Guard. They're an insurance company. And this is a real-time visualization of what's happening on their site. So if I click into one of these circles, you can see that this anonymous profile has an engagement score of 341, which we use that score for bid decisioning and display, creative targeting and selection and display, keyword optimization within search. We can also personalize the website experience off of that. And you can see that for this profile, we have the journey that this person's been on since September 29th. If I click over to the right, you can see how that score has changed. And then down below, you can see some baseline multi-channel interaction that we've had. A display click and a display impression. If I click on some of these other profiles, you'll see display, you'll see search. If it was known, you'd see a lot more. So this is useful to look at because it just shows the real-time nature of what we're doing within our platform. And then we're persisting and restoring these profiles within our DMP. So if I click into audiences here, what you're seeing is the categorization of audiences across the life cycle. So we have audiences for acquisition, we have audiences for abandonment and nurturing, customer marketing, personas and interests, as well as win-back and re-engagement. So if I click into personas and interests, you can see that we have a first-party audience called active family travelers. And the size of that audience consists of 488,000 people. So when I say it's a first-party audience, this is based upon profiles that have been brought in from internal CRM systems combined with the information that we're collecting on-site and through other direct channels, so email, for instance. So that 488,000, the first thing that we do is show the reach of it into these different channels below. And you can see that we have email, direct mail, outbound telemarketing, display, web, SMS, Facebook, as well as Twitter. Now, if I wanted to edit this audience, you can see the criteria that we're using for active family travelers. It's very simple. They're just saying, Give us everybody that's been in the website in the last 90 days that hit a page title that contains family, did a search for family, that's open an email, but they haven't made a purchase in the last 30 days. Let's say that we only wanted people that had an engagement overall score that was greater than 90. You can see how I can quickly come in, add a new condition, put it up over 90, and then up top here, I'm not going to save this, but if I did, the audience would refresh in about 90 seconds, and that audience count would change as well as the channel reach. To the right, by clicking through here, you can see all the different condition types that are available for audience selection when you're defining a first-party audience. As we customize the schema that supports a client, we may add other events to the DMP that they want to track. All of that becomes available for audience selection. So taking this a few steps further here, we've talked about the channels and the reach. You can see that of those 488,000 people, I've got 41,000 that I can remarket and display, 364,000 for email. I've got counts for direct mail and outbound telemarketing, as well as on-site, SMS, and I talked about Facebook and Twitter before. The reason why the Facebook number is bigger is because it consists of a match of the first-party audience combined with a lookalike on top of that. Same thing for Twitter. You can see for each one of these, there's an activation layer that I can step through. So if I wanted to send these 364,000 people an email, we have productized integrations with platforms such as ExactTarget. So if you click yes on that, then it's going to create that list over in your ESP. If going through this you say, hey, you know what, it makes a lot of sense to use IgnitionOne as the ESP, then you would just obviously send from our platform. While I'm here, this is a good opportunity to show you a profile that is actually stored within the platform. So we've seen that real-time view before with Live Marketer. This starts to show you how we're enriching those profiles and storing that information over time. So here you have Kate Barnes, a very mature, known customer. You can see that we have CRM attributes for her. We also have her device affinity. So 24% of the time she's on a desktop, 60% of the time she's on a mobile phone, 16% of the time she's on a tablet. And this is based on deterministic events. So if there's a purchase, if there's a social sign-in, if there's an email click, we are then connecting the dots and saying, hey, this device pertains to Kate. That's really important to be able to have that as a brand. So when you're doing device bridging and using things like statistical fingerprinting or other vendors that are out there, oftentimes they're never going to give you a certain match. It's going to be a probability. And so being able to have this deterministic information to be able to gauge the accuracy of those other providers is very important. We also have the anonymous history. So in the example that I gave where somebody just hits the site on an iPad and they're anonymous, we want to be able to link those to known profiles any chance that we get. So to my point about that identifiable event, if we recognize that it's Kate and we see that there's an anonymous profile on a device, we're going to be consolidating that profile or the anonymous profile around the known profile over time. So this allows us to better understand device relationships, develop a richer profile of all of the behavioral information that's taking place across different channels, and have a richer engagement score overall. If I jump back to the overview here, you may have seen with email, you had the ability to export a list. So with these other channels, whether it's email or whether it's direct mail or whether it's outbound telemarketing, there's a quick, easy wizard that you're able to do to be able to export lists out of the system into whatever traditional fulfillment system that you use for those offline channels. I'm going to go into display in a little bit here, but before I do that, I'm going to go into web. So web, what we mean by that is your website. And we don't even like to call this integration because simply what we're doing is writing out first-party cookie values into your cookie space with the audience ID for a given audience that somebody would qualify for. So if somebody shows up at a website and they meet the criteria for this audience, if they show up at Travel Guard and they meet the criteria for after the family travelers, we'll write out the audience ID into the cookie space, and then different tools like Monetize or Optimizely or even in-house content management systems, they can use those first-party values to be able to do a targeted website experience. Just like email, we also have native tools for website personalization. So if you create an audience and you want to jump over and configure the website experience to do that, you can do that rather than logging into another system, but you don't have to do that. All right, so I'm going to flip over into a preview real quick to show some of what is available for display activation. And I just want to talk real quick about what a preview is. So we design software very similar to how people build cars, where we're very prototype focused. We want to be able to really think about and contemplate what the end user needs and build back from there. As we develop and refine those prototypes, we make them available as previews so we can get feedback from the market to make sure we're going down the right path. Now, a preview capability can be something that's coming in 2015. It can be something that is coming in 2 months, 2 weeks, in beta right now. And the preview itself is showing the functionality alongside existing functionality that we had just looked at. So with the preview here for display activation, for those 27,000 people, and we're actually looking at an audience of actively beach-bound people now, if I wanted to activate this within IgnitionOne display, all I have to do is just click on that toggle, and that audience is available for targeting. So with IgnitionOne display, very simple, very easy to be able to activate these first-party audiences, literally with a click of a button into display, and then the next thing that just has to take place is the flighting of the campaign to that audience. If you're not using IgnitionOne display, we're going to be rolling out DSP integrations with Google DoubleClick Bid Manager, Turn Media Map through the remainder of the year going into 2015. And it's a very similar process there in terms of being able to activate the audience with a click of a button. So if I want to extend the reach of this first-party audience, down below here, you can see that we have characteristics as well as third-party audiences with the most overlap and what we refer to as IgnitionOne lookalikes. So up top, 78,000 people that are actively beach-bound. But what if I want to reach more people, right? I want to be able to do prospecting there. And so, there we go. Need to move the toolbar. What we're doing is looking at the third-party characteristics of that first-party audience. So as IgnitionOne, we track 700 million unique profiles on a monthly basis. And when we see the profiles from that first-party audience out on the Internet, what we're able to do then is look at the third-party characteristics of that audience. So things like gender, age, income. 70% of that audience tends to be male. We have the age breakout. We understand the income range that they're in. This provides some good indicators in terms of what other prospecting opportunities could be. Now, we also look at the overlap of that first-party audience with other third-party audiences. So you can see that we have a third-party audience for Datalogics, home values greater than 100,000. We've got overlap there for the Exclusive audience where the purchase category is leisure. So the overlap isn't huge, but for those third-party audiences, those could be good opportunities to do additional prospecting to the balance of those third-party audiences. And then down below, we also have IgnitionOne native lookalikes. So what that 1 million is saying is that within our cookie pool of 700 million unique users, of that 78,000 people that we have in our first-party audience, there's another 1 million people that look like that within that cookie pool. So being able to activate these audiences, whether it's the first-party audience, the second-party audience, the third-party audience, becomes very easy to do. So what I'm going to step into now is more of a preview of what's to come in 2015 in terms of a refresh or reskinning of our existing display UI. And so if I click into display and I go into campaigns, you can see the ease at which you're able to flight campaigns to those audiences. So you can see here that we have a Travel Guard Actively Beachbound campaign June 2014. And then if I go into the campaign details, you can see that the audiences that have been configured for this campaign are that first-party audience that we created, the Exclusive audience, as well as the IgnitionOne native lookalike audience there. Now, if you were using us for email, this is where having everything within one platform becomes really nice, because I can just flip over here, and if I wanted to send this email to that audience of actively beach-bound folks, all I have to do is just create the email and then schedule it to that list. And I can do a batch and blast email, or I can do something that is a little bit more automated. So again, getting away a little bit from the core DMP capabilities, but you can see how it's all related. So let me go back into analytics here. Within our digital marketing suite, we have very sophisticated analytic tools that are available. You can see here, this is actually for search, and we're looking at impressions, click-through rate, and the overall cost. Being able to look at key performance metrics by channel, as well as by audience across different channels, we allow you to do. In addition to this, we also have attribution. So when you think about all of the data that's available to us within the platform, I should say available to our clients within the platform, we have a lot of capabilities that become readily available to be able to do things like attribution. So what we're looking at here is across paid media, predominantly display and search, and this feeds right into insights that we can glean from it. So if we have all this data, if we're able to understand the relationship of the channels and ultimately what is performing and what is driving conversion, we can then also become much more predictive in terms of optimizing future spend. So that's where we get into media mix modeling. So this really focuses around, if we were to increase the spend, what should be the allocation of the media? And
Brian?
Pop up.
Brian?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a few questions coming in. I'm sending to you on the chat. If you can find there, we send a few questions to you in English.
Okay.
Of course.
Let me pull that up.
Yeah, it's up to you if you want to answer now or leave it to the end. But anyway.
Yeah, let's do the questions. Let's do the questions now. So where should I?
It's on. Or I can read to you anyway. It's a question from.
I see him.
Okay. From Marcelo Andrade about CRM integration, if it can be done with any CRM platform, and how about other systems such as ERPs, for example.
Yep.
If it's possible to integrate and enter with business rules for campaigns. So CRM integration.
Great questions. So what I'm stepping into right now are the data intake screens within the DMP. And so what I'm going to do is click on the diagram view. And this is a little spaghetti-ish. But what we're looking at is a data schema for known CRM information that would be coming in from a CRM system, or to the question, it could be from an ERP system. You can see here that we have an object for the profile. So the profile is storing the prospect and customer records, and you can see all of the fields that are available here. So there's a little bit of a delay. And then if I go back, you can also see that we have other objects here. We have an order object, which is storing the transaction. For a transaction, you can have individual line items or SKUs. Those line items or SKUs in a retail context can relate back to a products table, which then could tie to a product registration that somebody might fill out. And then that product registration could then tie back to the profile. And between the different objects within the schema, you can have a one-to-one or a one-to-many relationship. So I wanted to show this because when we're talking about CRM information, we have complete flexibility in terms of how we can add fields to those different objects, be able to create new objects, And as soon as that's done, then all of that configuration becomes available via our API to be able to post data to be able to ingest feeds into, and then it becomes available for audience selection. So to the follow-up question on that, specific campaign rules that might be defined within those systems, we would likely use the schema to inherit certain attributes or certain model scores that are being applied to profiles, and then depending upon the attribute itself, that can dictate the audience that somebody is then included in, which would change the experience that they might receive across different channels. Is there any other questions, Eduardo?
Sorry, Brian, I was disconnected here. Yes, there's another question from, can you, just a minute. From Pablo Vieira, and he asks, how does the platform work for publishers? I don't think it works for publishers. Does it?
Great question too. So a lot of what we've been focused on here today really pertains to the brand, the advertiser, and how increasingly the DMP is going from something that was just kind of thought about in a paid media display context to a broader application within the marketing organization and really within the company as a whole. It's becoming an enterprise level consideration that's being made because it touches on a lot of different parts of the enterprise. So as IgnitionOne and what we're doing with our direct DMP offering, we're really focusing more so on that. In terms of DMP as it relates to the publisher, that's a great area for exploration. So just like traditional first-generation DMP deployments had a media orientation, DMP deployments for publishers had the same, and it was really focused around the monetization of data and how that can be done. And then also, too, providing more targeting opportunities for publishers, advertisers, when people are off-site, right? So that, too, is evolving. And as a publisher, when you start to think about different advertising opportunities that present themselves, or different ad products that present themselves, when you have richer profiles as well as broader multi-channel capability, then it is it's an area for consideration. So I do think that there are some things that align between the adoption that's taking place with advertisers, what potentially could take place with publishers, but it really depends on the publisher's business if they're going to go down that path. We've seen within B2B publishing that this is a really important thing to be able to do, to be able to support marketing programs that are multi-channel on behalf of advertisers. And then also, too, a lot of what we've looked at here today, they're actually putting in the hands of sales reps to be able to show audience opportunities and reach to potential advertisers. So we don't let the sales reps have the full run of the system, but in terms of saying, hey, advertiser XYZ, here's the audience, here's the reach across the different channels, we've seen it actually being used as a sales tool. Any other questions, Eduardo?
That's all for now. Brian, this is all for now.
Great. Okay. All right. So let me jump back into analytics here. All right. I'm having a little bit of a challenge there pulling up that screen right now, so I'll just kind of stop here. So that largely consists of my presentation. I want to leave about 10 minutes or so for any questions or answers. Edmardo, if there are any additional questions or answers out there, please let me know. If you have anything that you would like me to touch on specifically, I'd be happy to do that. I had a few more things that I wanted to talk about there, but I'm having a little difficulty jumping into that part of the system right now, and so I'll just pause and see what you think.
Okay, we don't have questions at this moment.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope that this was helpful in terms of being able to show where DMPs are going, the broad set of use cases that they're able to support within an organization, how the industry is adopting them, and how clients, such as the one that I had stepped through, are really using them within their organizations today to drive incremental revenue, to get better analytics, to be able to understand the end consumer better in a way that it really completes a full cycle between insight to activation, to be able to drive results to help folks acquire customers, convert customers better, as well as grow customer value. So if there aren't any additional questions or comments, that essentially concludes today's presentation, and I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Hi, Brian. Sorry. There's a question from Namura. The average time for implementation of a DMP, how it works practically?
That's a good point to end on. So there's two things that have to happen. The definition of the schema to ingest the known CRM information, and the deployment of the tags to ingest the behavioral information. Now that's a bit of a gross simplification, because we all know that within larger organizations, deploying tags isn't necessarily a super quick thing to do. There's a process, and sometimes even committees that relate to that. And then the known CRM information. You know, if there is a enterprise data warehouse or a CRM system where they've already addressed a lot of the customer data integration issues, and there's already feeds being passed back and forth, that can be a very simple thing to do. But sometimes it's not necessarily that easy. So the quick answer is figure between 60 to 90 days to have the tags deployed and to have a schema in place where you can be ingesting key bits of known CRM information to be able to drive the immediate audience opportunities. So when you get into schemas that are a little bit more involved, that are pulling data from multiple systems, that can be extended 4 to 8 weeks, but that's a pretty good starting point, 60 to 90 days for that initial schema and tag deployment to be able to begin using the DMP.
Okay, there's another question. There's a couple of people saying thank you, as Leticia Camp and Luis Foreman. And Andrea Freitas asks about how does the onboard of third-party data work, and how is it shown on the DMP?
Great question. So the onboarding of the third-party data, if I jump back into this view here, so the primary visualization that we do today pertains to the first-party audience itself. So you can understand the relationship of the first-party audience with third-party characteristics, and then understanding the overlap for activation. The onboarding of the third-party data is essentially already done for these capabilities here through our cookie pool that we have, that I had mentioned before, is about 700 million unique profiles. So between that and the existing data relationships that we have, that's pretty much done. If there are other third-party partners that you want to include with your DMP deployment that you have direct relationships with, we can do that for both the known CRM information as well as other online third-party data providers that are dealing more in the anonymous context.
There's another two questions from Paulo Arruda. One is if it's correct, you mentioned 45-60 days for implementation. And second question is if you already have a price model for Brazil. That's a tricky one.
So yeah, just to reiterate, more of a 60 to 90 day deployment. If I said 45, I apologize there. But again, yeah, 60 to 90 days for a base schema for the known CRM information, and assuming that we can get tags deployed, that's generally a fair time frame to consider. Pricing is, I think, I'm not going to get into the detailed rate card today, but I think it would seem very reasonable when you look at the dollars that are spent and the time that's involved with all of the different data silos that exist today within marketing organizations, the cost of enterprise marketing databases. The DMP pricing model that IgnitionOne has is very reasonable. It's based upon the number of active profiles, which is really a combination of your anonymous profiles and your known customer records. That puts the company in a tier, which for the most part is fixed unless it's changing wildly from month to month. And there's some provisioning fees and some deployment support that's also involved. But like I said, it oftentimes is a fraction of the dollars that are invested in traditional marketing database deployments.
Great. From Luis Forman, is a good friend of us. How do you implement data from mobile apps that do not have cookies?
So we recently completed a purchase of a company called Human Demand, which is completely cookieless. It's all based upon device ID, which gives us enormous capabilities in terms of the information that we're able to relate to the profiles themselves. Now, even though we have this technical capability that is cookieless, that's based off device ID, and we are able to understand insight in terms of what's taking place in app, across apps, on a device, there are definitely privacy considerations that have to be taken into account. So right now, what we're doing is looking at ingesting a lot of that information that we have for anonymous profiles, while in parallel, we're exploring some of the privacy considerations that need to be taken into account to be able to relate that to the known profile. So for instance, to put it in very practical terms, when we're looking at that Kate Barnes profile, what realistically, from a privacy perspective, are we able to pull in from those environments, even though we have the capability to do so. So a little bit of a vague answer there, but there are definitely privacy considerations that need to be taken into account.
Last one from Luis Forman. He's interested in mobile, so he's asking, on the campaigns, can you integrate with push notification on iOS and Android?
Yeah, so we don't have productized integrations with folks like Urban Airship and some of the other ones, but very easy to do in terms of utilizing the existing push notifications, or not push notifications, the existing export that we have, assuming that we have the corresponding device ID for that user.
Okay, that was the last one we have here. And yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. It was fantastic.
Wonderful. And again, I appreciate the opportunity and everybody's time here today, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions, explore any topics that people might want to explore following the call.
Planning to come to Brazil?
Give me the ticket in there.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Thanks, Eduardo. Appreciate it. We'll be there soon.
Obrigado a todos que participaram e até a próxima. Obrigado. Um abraço.